Welcome to the Digital Adoption Show Season 2, the podcast that walks and talks about the world of L&D. In today's discussion, we will talk about an L&D innovator's journey who believed in the power of learning.
I'm your host, Shagun Vaish, CSM at Whatfix. Today, I have with me Nick Shackleton, who is running his own consultancy firm and believes in the passion of learning. So, Nick, can I quickly have your introduction for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, I'm Nick Shackleton-Jones. I am CEO and founder at Shackleton Consulting. Prior to that, I was, if I go sort of backwards in time, the Chief Learning Officer at Deloitte in the UK for a couple of years. And then I set up and ran the Learning Innovation Service line at BA Consulting in the UK for 4 years, for very client-facing work. Before that, I was at BP, doing a big job, and before that at the BBC, and then I worked at Siemens, and I worked in a startup, and I started my career as a psychology lecturer. That was my first proper job. Also author of a book called How People Learn. So that's me.
Wow, that's a very long journey and a very inspiring one. Nick, we understand that you have a passion for learning things, and that has helped you become an independent consultant from being a learning innovator at so many different big companies. So share a little bit more about that with us.
The way you describe it, the way language forces us to frame things, you say a passion for learning. I think learning has a passion for me, if you like. It's true that a person can pursue their passions, but they can also be pursued by them. And so I think I've felt driven to answer the call of learning, to write books about learning, to, try and fix learning and to help us move away from education for many years. But actually that passion for learning probably stemmed in its early days from just a passion for understanding the world. I was a curious youth. I studied philosophy and psychology. And the reason behind that was I couldn't see the point in doing anything if I didn't understand what it was all ultimately about. What the meaning of life was, if you like. So that's where I started. So I started by trying to understand everything. And once I'd understood everything, I wanted to understand people. And once I wanted to understand people, I found my way into understanding learning. So it's more the way the world has sort of influenced me than the way I've influenced the world.
That's such a beautiful worldview. I mean, I don't think we normally, think about that, something is coming to us. We are normally just chasing things, right? So it's just beautiful how you put it. And
thank you.
Obviously, learning more about the psychology of it, we tend to obviously ignore this in the long term, but it catches up with us that, there's nothing more important than understanding humans.
Because, we spend so much of our time with people, but I guess one of the worst things that happens to people is that they don't really understand what their life is about until it's too late. So I've lived my life sort of backwards, I suppose, in a way. But many people I see sort of, they get into, it's a little bit like one of those amusement park rides where you get into a slide and you just keep sliding and sliding and sliding until you get to the bottom. And that slide is education. And so you're sort of pushed into the funnel of education very early on. And by the time you kind of pop out the other side, you get the next job. And you're probably well into kind of midlife before you actually stop and reflect on whether or not you're doing what you want to do, what your passions are, or whether or not you've just spent your entire career doing things that other people wanted you to do and doing what you're told and meeting your deadlines and so on. And I think that's sort of tragic, I think.
You're making me think my decisions right now. You have been an innovator throughout your career, right, Nick? And I think that's where all this all this wisdom is coming from. So what has motivated you to transform the world? Like, obviously, we can see that you have a very different worldview. Normally, how we are chasing things, you think that things come to you. So, elaborate a little bit more about that for our audience.
Okay, very good. I guess there's probably a couple of motivations. I think one is probably genetic. As many people will be familiar with Marie Curie, who discovered radium, I think the only person to have won 2 Nobel Prizes. She occasionally said that we should worry more about ideas than we should about people. And I think probably genetically I'm not terribly empathetic, and I'm quite introverted, and I worry more about kind of ideas. I'm fascinated by ideas. And I think that has helped me to innovate because I've obsessed over thoughts rather than just worrying about my following, for example, kind of social media. And those sorts have kind of driven me on. So I think that genetic side, I guess that the other motivation has come from kind of philosophy and psychology. And my kind of training in psychology and philosophy, which sort of led me to kind of question a lot of what I was seeing. So I've been an annoyance for a long time. And the nature of that annoyance is I tend to question things, and I'm not too worried if the answers upset people, I'm afraid. And that combination of kind of genetics and environment, I think, has helped move me on.
It's amazing. What would be one instance where you would say that you really annoyed someone a lot, but you were happy with the end result?
I love that. I think that probably it's hard to know, but I guess one of the biggest things is challenging educational conventions. So when we talk about learning, a lot of people are actually conflating learning and education. And if you scratch the surface of what they're doing, they're just sort of mirroring whatever horrible stuff happened to them at school, which is broadly content dumping. That's how sort of pretty much how education works. Bit of a generalization, but broadly true that effectively it involves taking some content and you put it up on a screen in a classroom, or you put it in an e-learning module and people are exposed to it somehow. And this is supposed to change their behavior. And it doesn't work. And it's just a sort of odd ritual we developed because we didn't want to get small children trapped, in machinery. And of course, the way that human beings work is they get attached to whatever they've done. It's called dissonance through cognitive dissonance through effort. So the more you do something, the more liable you are to defend it because you've invested so much effort into it. So saying to people, as I frequently do, that education is just kind of monstrous waste of time and it's effectively a way of kind of torturing and damaging people systematically, and we should stop doing it and we start thinking about learning instead, tends to annoy people who've either had to suffer education and therefore post-rationalize it, or who've spent a lifetime kind of working in education. But having said that, there are people who work in education who have this sort of intuitive feeling that they're fighting the system, that they do really care about people and that the system isn't helping them to help people. And it's actually that motivation that I want to connect with, people who really want to make a difference and sense that there's something wrong.
That's beautiful. That is, I think, one of the core problems that I think the entire world is facing, that we are not teaching kids the right way. We are not teaching them how to think. We are just teaching them what they should know. So that's a very core problem, I think, which you have identified and I think are working towards as well. So that's amazing. I hope you found a few children who really, a few students specifically who really get inspired by this and, have probably reached out to you as well for the same.
Yes, but you used an interesting word there because when you ask people, what they remember from school and what changed their life. Sometimes it will be teachers, but this is the interesting thing. It won't be the content, typically. Yes. It will be teachers who cared about them, who, as you say, inspired them. And this is the essence of the theory that I introduced. So I introduced the first general theory of learning, which is kind of an odd thing to say. You don't really expect some L&D bloke on a podcast to say they introduced the first general theory of learning. But I did. I wrote it in a book called How People Learn. And the essence of that is that we're organisms. We're not computers. Our minds don't work like computers. We don't store information in the way that books or computers do. Yeah. We only remember the things that matter to us. So you and I have different interests. And if we have the same experience, and this is true experimentally, we will remember different things from that experience, depending on what impacted us, what mattered to us. That even governs our attention. And so if you actually want to design a learning experience, the theory says you have to start by understanding what an individual cares about. And of course, that's the fundamental flaw in education. None of us went to school and were asked on day one, tell me, what are the top 20 things that really matter to you? Oh, in that case, if you're interested in robots and insects, we'll design a curriculum around those things. And so this fundamental flaw, this idea that we sort of dump information on people and we call it learning, has persisted for decades now. It has to come to an end. It's just such a waste of time.
That is true. And also, those early minds, they can learn so much, and just not teaching them the right way, we are wasting so much time. So hang on, it's so true. So, yeah. So what are a few suggestions from you, Nick, that you think, would create a learner-friendly environment? And any concept that has specifically worked for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the simplest way to think about learning is that our learning is driven by challenges. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those challenges can come in the form of a story, but more regularly they come from our work. Anyone who's familiar with 70-20-10 and the Work Centre for Creative Leadership knows this. So our learning is really driven by the challenges that we experience. And so if we want people to support their learning, there's really only two things we can do. We can challenge them, or we can look at the challenges that they already have in their jobs and create the resources that support them. This is why we use Google and YouTube in the way that we do. We hit a problem, the washing machine is broken, the Wi-Fi is down, and that challenge drives us to use Google to look up the answer. So really, the simplest thing that we can do is understand the challenges that people have, or create new challenges, and either create resources that help them or experiences which kind of challenge them. And from that simple idea, I developed a human-centered design process, which is all about talking to people, understanding what they care about, what challenges they have, called the 5DI, because that sounds a bit abstract. And if you want to change an entire industry, you have to provide the tools and techniques that people use. And so the 5DI toolkit is free for everybody to use. It's on the website, not promoting myself particularly, but just wanting to change the industry and make more of a difference. So that's the practical advice, which is focus on either creating useful stuff that helps people or challenging experiences that change people. And all of the tools you need to do that systematically in a data-driven way are free.
Especially with the advancement of technology, we have definitely seen that there's a lot of knowledge out there which we can access on our fingertips. So, Nick, you mentioned this 5DI model. Would you want to elaborate a little bit on that? And also, as you mentioned that, don't want to promote yourself, but I truly believe that you should promote yourself. If there is an idea which can change the world, and especially with the work that you are doing, I think it's very, very impressive. So please go ahead and promote yourself here a little bit more.
Well, I like to order takeout and go to the movies, but the reality is I'm the servant of an idea. So yes, I like the way you framed it. It's really the idea that I want to kind of spread, which is why these ideas are, as you say, kind of open source and kind of free, because I feel that progress is good. But yes, I can talk a little bit about 5DI. 5DI is a series of words you may recognize: define, discover, design, develop, deploy, iterate. But let me bring that to life a little bit. So in the first stage of a program design, thinking about changing performance or experience in an organization, what we do is we take the time to define, to talk to senior stakeholders and to really understand what are the things we'd like to change in terms of kind of think, feel, do for a target population. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, because I've done it many times. And when you look, for example, at an induction program, the business will sometimes say, well, we want people to feel like they belong. We want people to feel like they made the right choice. We want people to feel a sense of being connected to our purpose. We want people to feel confident. And then you say, so what are you doing? You're putting them in a classroom and showing them lots of PowerPoint slides for half a day. Is that how you would achieve those things? And they say, well, no. And that's my point. People are just doing this weird educational ritual that doesn't achieve what they would like to achieve. So the first stage is, let's be really clear on what outcomes we're trying to deliver. The second stage, discover, is let's talk to those people. Let's talk to new starts, for example. Let's talk to the consumers of the product. You can think of that as design thinking if you like, but the idea is very simple. If what they care about is going to govern what they learn, then you need to know what they care about. New starters, for example, care about fitting in. They care about doing the right things in the first weeks after joining. So you can give them a checklist. You can give them a list of top 10 mistakes to avoid. You can introduce them to peers. You can talk to them about what to dress, how to dress, what to wear. And they love all of that stuff because that's what they pull. So the first two stages are connecting the strategy and the outcomes to the individuals, the consumers, and what they care about through define and discover. And then in designing, we look at resources and experiences. Only those two things. We use an approach called the CTRE matrix, which is the concerns, tasks, resources, experience matrix. Very simple. The idea is you list all of the things that people are struggling to do, all of the things they care about, like fitting in, and then you come up with resources, like short videos, or experiences, like meeting your peers, that address those line by line. And that's how you build a program. So it's quite straightforward. It works. It's radically different to education, but it's progress.
Beautiful. That's, I think, a very systematic way of thinking about this. But we never think about a systematic way to learn. I don't think we're ever taught that either. So I think that's amazing. Have you tried to implement this model anywhere? Any success stories from this?
Yeah, sure. For probably now about 20 years, the model originally evolved out of the BBC, where we were looking, for example, at techniques that we use, for example, by service design. If you're doing service design, you take the time to actually understand customer touch points. You design an experience end to end. Why are we not doing this in learning? The answer is because we're doing education, which is just about putting content in a course. So we started moving away from that, and we sort of systematized it together, working with a team over many years, implemented it literally hundreds, if not thousands of times. It's being used by lots of big organizations, Novo Nordisk, BT, Nestle, or GSK. And the most recent example, which I'm happy to share because we won an award for it, is we revised the Deloitte induction program. And when I joined, people were spending 2 weeks in a hotel, in a classroom, where people were playing PowerPoints for the most part. And we spent some time talking to the business about what would you like the program to achieve. And it's remarkable because nobody had really ever thought about that before. It was just like, we just thought we'd put all the content in a course. You say, well, what outputs, what outcomes, what measurable results would you like to achieve? Ooh, maybe we'd like fewer of those individuals to leave. Maybe we would like to see our client feedback scores improve. Maybe we'd like to see them spend less time on the bench before they get on a client project. So those sorts of things. And then you talk to the audience, the new starts, and you find out, what, as we did, what do you really care about? And they cared about building their network, about progressing, about showing up in the right ways, about doing a good job. And then we designed a program which is a combination of experiences and digital resources, things that they could access on their mobile device, and simulations of real situations. And we won an award. We won the Gold Award at Learning Technologies in 2021 for Best Onboarding Program. And the feedback for it was fantastically positive, even though we had to deliver most of it digitally in the end. The Net Promoter Score was a lot higher than it was for the previous program. But we also saw good business results from it as well. We didn't see people leaving. We got fantastic social media coverage. People had a great experience, felt really valued, and were more confident in being able to kind of take their career forwards. So we delivered on the business outcomes.
That's amazing. I mean, and seeing that kind of result right away, right? Normally we take a learning program, we hope that, it works. But here we are seeing the feedback right away, which is amazing, which is, I think, very impressive.
Yeah.
So just taking a step back, we know that the, future of the world and L&D is all digital, as you just mentioned as well, that, you had to deliver all of it digitally. So why are social networks and human-centered design, right, so important for the future? Like, what would you want to elaborate on that?
I think that human-centered design is essential across lots of fields. So the reason design thinking is important is if as a business you want to sell your product, it's not a bad idea to talk to your customers. If as a learning team you want your learning services or products to be effective, why wouldn't you take time to actually understand the needs of your learners? That's a great way to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of what you're doing, but also to improve your learning culture. When most people join a business, their initial impression of learning is it's like rain. It's a negative impression. They're just being forced to comply, and complete this and click next here. Yeah. Imagine if you could turn that around and actually help people to do their jobs more seamlessly. That would influence lots of things. It would reduce the number of people leaving. It would improve employee satisfaction. It would improve productivity. And it would improve experience. So lots of reasons why you would want to do human-centered design when you're working with people, to improve their performance and to improve their experience primarily. So that's important. You also mentioned social media and why social media is important. I guess I've worked with some organizations who are sort of increasingly realizing that they cannot control their reputation and their external brand independently or in a kind of top-down way, that they are dependent on their employees to be ambassadors of their organization. And they're exposed to increasingly levels of transparency. So, social media is important for lots of reasons, but from an organizational perspective, one of those big reasons is that your employees are your ambassadors for your brand.
Yeah, I think that's a very underutilized area, actually. So I think, companies are thinking right about it. And I personally know that I love working at Whatfix. And at times I'm definitely out there posting it, obviously on my postal page, about, the good time I've had here, or, the good memories that I've been able to make at work, in general. And it's very organic, right? It's not something that someone is asking me to do. It's just something that I feel, and I feel like sharing it with my people. So, obviously, we are ambassadors of the company as well.
That's really interesting. And of course, there are organizations like Glassdoor that many people know about who kind of gather up some of that data in a more systematic way. And that will influence your ability to recruit, your ability to actually, and the cost of hiring talent. So these things, they're important. They have a real impact.
Definitely. Okay. Now, obviously, since you have been working in this vertical for such a long time, so why do you think that, it is difficult for a leader to modify his or her leadership style? And what effect does it have on the organizational change?
That's really interesting. Leaders, I think, have a huge influence on the culture of an organization. And if you've had to work for a bad leader, it makes every day miserable. So, it's really important that we kind of support leaders into being good leaders. Now, what makes it difficult? Two things. The first thing is we tend to promote people who are good at their jobs. And quite often, that means that they're bad at leadership. I've worked with some engineering organizations where if somebody is super as an engineer, we say, oh, you're very good at your job, so we're going to promote you to a leader. And then their natural inclination is to tell everybody else how to do things like them. And that's sort of quite infantilizing for people. And often it means that they lack people skills. So there's a sort of systematic way in which we sort of promote the wrong people into leadership roles, and then we have to remediate that problem. The other reason I think is it's difficult. You asked why is it difficult to change, which is that people generally sort of pick up a lot of their leadership style from their parents, and so their idea of what it means to be in authority and how you should behave is quite deeply ingrained and embedded. So we have to take the time to actually step them through experiences which develop them in different ways and show them a different way of working with people that isn't merely telling people what to do and telling people off when they don't do it right.
It's just while I've been talking to you, I've realized how much you're able to connect everything back to that human element of, which we normally kind of ignore. That if I'm talking about leadership styles, we'll probably talk about the organization, but you went back to your parental, genes that drives leadership style, and which I don't think I've ever heard before. Definitely I'm loving talking to you. So one more question here for you, that as you mentioned, right, that, a lot of people are just, you mentioned that engineers who are good at their job, they definitely lack the people skills. For organizations, what is your recommendation that, how to firstly choose the leaders that will lead the organization? And secondly, if you are promoting people, right, obviously, because people need to grow in their careers as well, what are the skill sets that you should equip them with before promoting them, for managing people as well?
Really good question. I've worked on lots of leadership programs and I love designing leadership programs. So in practice, the sorts of skills that we work on are probably quite familiar to people listening. Things like coaching skills, the importance of development. I'll tell a bit of a story because I think stories are always fun. I was interviewing leaders in a big oil and gas company in order to build a better leadership program. This is what we do. We talk to them about what they struggle with. And actually, a number of them said pretty much the same thing, which is, I think I could do the job if it wasn't for all the people stuff. I said, well, wait, hang on a second. What do you mean the people stuff? And they said, all that HR nonsense, performance reviews, development planning, succession planning, talent. It's like, well, hang on. That is the job. The people stuff typically in a well-formed leadership role is about 60%. And so your question is, well, let's break that down. A big part of it is just having good quality, supportive conversations. That's really important. So kind of coaching skills, feedback skills, kind of the hard end, having difficult conversations better. Well, we say difficult conversations, but they shouldn't be difficult conversations. You need to build relationships to the point where you can say quite difficult things quite easily. That's really important. And the other thing is about operating inclusively. One of the biggest flaws of leaders is that they project. We all do. In our conversations, we tend to dislike people who are different from us. So we project ourselves, into those conversations. And at leadership level, that's particularly damaging because it means that they will recruit people who are like them and they will underserve or depress people who are different. And that's a fundamental problem for lots of reasons. It damages engagement, performance, and diversity, and so on. So having people more accepting and open to difference and more inclusive in their leadership style, who are supportive, who have good people skills, who know how to have a good conversation, and can importantly understand what people care about. And there's a very simple way of doing that. We've got a series of exercises that you can run where leaders really get to know their people, what they care about, because that's what you need to do if you're going to connect your people to the organizational strategy.
Yeah.
You can't just say, look, everybody, this is our purpose, these are our values, this is our strategy, this is where we're all going. You have to say, look, I think that there's a way that your career, your future, your passion for, say, creativity can really help us to deliver what we're trying to achieve, our vision as an organization. So that's an important part of the role as well.
This is something which a lot of organizations are lacking right now. And obviously, it's because we are always in the hustle mode and we are always trying to just get somewhere, right? So we do need to, especially as organizations, we do need to think back and reflect that, are we creating the value system for the organization as well, the organizational culture that we talked about? So very beautifully put. Okay, we are almost, I've had such great conversations with you right now, but I thought it would be a little bit fun to have a small rapid fire round. What do you think about that?
I think it's great fun. Let's do it, yeah.
Okay. So what are your favorite books that you would recommend?
I love Nietzsche. I love reading philosophy. So anything by Nietzsche probably I would recommend. So yeah.
Okay. Amazing. I'm honestly very impressed with your thought process. So I might definitely go back to those books. Okay, what's the most interesting thing that you own?
Most interesting thing that I know. Complete set of real armor as worn by the Witcher, Geralt of Rivia from the Witcher Netflix series you may recognize. So at one point I'm going to go along to Comic-Con in my armor at some point, I guess.
Wow. Share a little bit more. Why is it important to you?
Why? I guess I was an avid computer gamer. It's a quick fire round, so I don't want to tell long, boring stories, but I used to play, it's a fantastic game. If you haven't played them, The Witcher series, fantastic series of games. But it also, I think, appealed to me. I could identify with this character who sort of is somewhat solitary, let's be honest, and sort of roams around slaying, monsters and being a little grumpy along the way. But, he's on some sort of journey of his own, and he has a historical role to play in the world, despite the fact that on the one hand he's kind of slaying monsters for money. He's also of historical importance in terms of the overall narrative of that era. So I think that probably not unlike, or I like to imagine not unlike me. But also, there's another reason, which is he's quite an old superhero, if you like, and there are very few. If you look at kind of fiction, Marvel, and so on, all of the superheroes are kind of generally sort of young and beautiful, and I'm sort of getting on a bit. So I could identify with this sort of slightly greying, slightly grumpy hero.
That's so beautiful and interesting. I love superheroes, but you're so right that, I don't think they are representing the entire, we don't be just connected to the teens and kids, right? But I think, us adults also need our own superheroes.
Yeah.
So, and even as you mentioned, a little bit more mature, great superheroes, because we need them our entire life. They give us hope. Yeah. So we do need them.
Yeah.
I think we should, at least I'll write a note to Disney that, hey, we need a little bit more superheroes. These ones aren't doing justice to us.
Do you have a favorite superhero?
I do. I love Wonder Woman. So it's definitely my favorite superhero. I love what she stands by. I love that how she's just so independent and fierce. And then she has this human touch about everything. Everything she touches is with so much empathy and so much love that I have so much to learn from her.
There we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, what is one thing that has driven your life?
Understanding, more than anything else, the desire to understand the universe, people, learning, cognition. It's, I suppose, to the point of obsession. So understanding is what drives me in every conversation, in fact. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. Have you seen this movie called Sunrise, I think, or the series that is there? So it's a set of 3 movies. It's called Sunrise, Sunset, and I think one more. And, there is this very beautiful line in that movie, which is one of my favorite lines, that if there is any beauty in this world, it's about understanding someone.
Great.
So,
I've just jotted them down. I'm going to go and look for it.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't, but thank you very much for the recommendation.
Yes, I know we were supposed to have a rapid fire, but it's just that there's so much more to know that I'm just getting a little bit into details. But it's a romantic series. The first few movies are much nicer, but it's a beautiful, beautiful series. You should definitely, I think you will really enjoy them.
Thank you so much.
Okay, last, what is your advice for young HR and L&D professionals?
Challenge convention. So sadly, we're an industry that I think has fallen into lots of conventions that don't necessarily make a difference. And many of us are passionate about making a difference. And if we're not, it becomes quite corrosive for us in our careers. So if you really want to make a difference, one of the best ways to do that is to challenge some of the conventions and think, perhaps there's a better way of doing this. And in order to determine that better way, connect with the audience, really think about the customer experience, because ultimately that's what you're delivering a difference to. You know, it's a horrible thing to come and go into big organizations as an HR professional, create your strategy papers, sit on governance meetings, but not make any difference to people. So let's avoid doing that. Let's kind of challenge some of those conventions and make a difference.
Only if every leader in the world was listening to you right now. And I hope through our podcast, they actually do. But thank you so much, Nick, for all your wisdom and sharing with us your journey. It was one of my highlights of the week, I would say. That thank you so much for doing this for us.
You were very kind, but I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.